So you find Rockman, you bring him in, or you follow him to where he's going to meet with Zarqawi?
And yeah, let me point out that, this was an entire team effort. There was a huge organization. There's people who, do surveillance. There's people who do, there's interrogators. There's analysts supporting all this. There's operations officers, intelligence officers. There's numerous people dedicated in this process. So it's an entire team effort to make this happen. I happen to have the opportunity to be at the end of that chain of events to locate him. But there was numerous other links in that chain prior to that allowed this to happen. But ultimately what we did is we followed Rockman. In the book I talk about the first time we followed him, we were all watching it live and we lost him. And we were all so disheartened because we had worked so hard to find this man and to get a path to Zarqawi, and
How'd
we
you
lost
lose
him. Baghdad traffic in tall buildings, it's hard to follow people. It's harder than I think we give it credit for. The people who do the surveillance of these people that we're watching and following, this is a very tough skill, and they're very talented, but sometimes the elements just play against you.
So how did you get him?
Well, they picked him up again a couple weeks later, and they followed him, and we knew that there was a tactic in which he would change cars. And when he got into a certain type of vehicle, we knew that meant he would be going to meet with Zarqawi. And he did that. And, we were all in a room watching this live on TV. And that car went to a house out in rural Iraq. And we watched him go inside, and we waited, and then the house exploded when some Air Force F-16s dropped bombs on it. And at that point, people cheered, but they weren't sure that Zarqawi was inside. There was no way to be 100% sure, but I knew at that time 100% that Zarqawi was in that house. And it was just a gut feeling that we had been right.
Was there any thought of capturing him as opposed to killing him?
We would have loved to have captured him because the intelligence that he could have provided, and we had a whole plan in place, obviously. We were prepared to interrogate him. However, the decision was made by our leadership to drop the bombs because it would have taken some time to get to his location, and he may have escaped. I mean, he escaped once before by running a checkpoint. And so I think it was a good decision that we had to eliminate him when we had the chance versus risking him getting away again.
I want to go to some larger issues. This very important point that you make, that you believe that more than 3,000 U.S. soldiers were killed in Iraq. I mean, this is a huge number because of torture, because of U.S. practices of torture. Explain what you mean.
Well, when I was in Iraq, we routinely handled foreign fighters who we would capture. Several of them had been scheduled to be suicide bombers, and we had captured them before they carried out their missions.
Coming from where?
They came from all over the area. They came from Yemen, they came from Northern Africa, they came from Saudi, all over the place. And the number one reason these foreign fighters gave for coming to Iraq was routinely because of Abu Ghraib, because of Guantanamo Bay, because of torture practices. In their eyes, they see us as not living up to the ideals that we have prescribed to. We say that we represent freedom, liberty, and justice, but when we torture people, we're not living up to those ideals. And it's a huge incentive for them to join Al-Qaeda. You also have to kind of put this in the context of Arab culture and Muslim culture and how important shame, the role of shame in that culture. And when we torture people, we bring a tremendous amount of shame on them. And so it is a huge motivator for these people to join Al-Qaeda and come to Iraq.
So talk about the pressure, I guess you could say the peer pressure, for you to torture, and how you decided to follow the approach you did.
Yeah, torture, it's so narrowly or broadly defined depending on who you're talking to these days. I would say torture to me is just unethical behavior. And you can do things that are legal within the rules that are unethical. And so I just know me by my gut feeling based on the principles that I was raised on, that my parents gave to me, that there's things I'll never do. Because I know it feels wrong and it is wrong. And others felt comfortable either pushing all the way up to the limits and doing things that were unethical but were legal, or breaking the rules. And I felt that was not something I was ever going to do, and I wasn't going to allow my team to do. I think what's more important at this point is we know that torture has cost us American lives. We know that it's ineffective, and we know that it's wrong and it's damaged our image. I think, for me as a military officer, my job isn't to identify broken wheels, it's to fix them. And so the approach that I took and that I talk about in the book is, how do we move forward? We're given this choice of either terrorist attacks or torture, but maybe there's a third way. Maybe there's a better way to do interrogations that has nothing to do with torture. And in the book, I describe the process of coming up with these new ways, and how my team, together, we were able to come up with the new methods.
We have to break, but we're going to come back to this discussion and also talk with Scott Horton and who should be held responsible for the torture practices the government has been involved with, from Guantanamo to Abu Ghraib and beyond. Matthew Alexander is our guest. It's not his name, but it's the name he's chosen. It is the name on his book, How to Break a Terrorist: The U.S. Interrogators Who Use Brains, Not Brutality, to Take Down the Deadliest Man in Iraq. This is Democracy Now! We'll be back in a minute.